I'm third generation farmer here. We've got we farm 2,500 hectares of owned and leased. Enterprises, we're half crop, half sheep. Okay. And with the sheep side of things, we have sheep for wool, meat, and Pole Dorset stud and a merino stud, pole merino stud.
Oh, okay. So all stud, or you have commercial as well?
Oh, commercial as well.
Well, yeah. So the commercial is self-replacing merino with, and then you have a crossy component to it?
Yes. Yeah, mostly self-replacing merino with some crossbred lambs.
Okay. We
grow canola, barley, oats, wheat, lupins and fodder crops. No fixed rotation, it just depends on the paddock, what's going to benefit the paddock and what's the best fit for the paddock at that time.
Okay.
No fixed length to the rotation either. That depends on the paddock. Crop rotations can be 1 year or they can be 10 years. It varies.
Yeah, but if it's a crop paddock, can have all paddocks can either be crop or pasture.
Yes.
Yeah.
Although this year, some of our cropping paddocks are well and truly underwater, so they probably shouldn't be cropping paddocks.
Okay. And your fodder, can you what's your program around your fodder crops?
Fodder crops are generally a grazing barley with ryegrass and clover. They are the last crop in a cropping rotation as it goes back into pasture. So we'll seed that, we'll lamb into it, then we wean into it, and then allow it to set seed. So the following year it's back to pasture. So
you can get a diversity of crop diversity in that fodder crop.
Mm.
Yeah, and then that sets up well for the continued pasture.
Yeah, so you're not reseeding a pasture, you're reseeding a fodder crop, which gives you a bit more pasture growth.
But then, how do you graze that? You establish it and then just graze it a couple of times a year, let it set seed.
Yeah. Try and seed it early.
Yeah.
Graze it. Lamb into it. It's really good. You have grass. Crop this high. It's really good for lambing into, and then they come out and then we wean into it.
Oh, okay.
And then let it set seed.
And when do you lamb?
Middle of July to middle of August.
Okay. Regenerative agriculture is about long-term sustainability. So what are your key goals or objectives in 1, 5, 10, 20 years, do you think, in that length of time when you plan your management around the farm? Was it?
Our biggest challenges here would be non-wetting gravels and salinity.
Okay.
And so long-term management, it's always got those two things in mind that we're trying to improve on them.
And what are your strategies for managing those?
With the non-wetting gravels, we've found they really need ground cover, they need stubble retention or dry matter left at the end of a pasture phase, just so when you get the early rains, when you get rains, I should say. So when you get the rain, it's already got those root channels and it's got something stopping it just running off. So you get that infiltration and just build up organic matter in the soil and on top of the soil, and that really helps with that non-wetting. We also, in the cropping phase, we also put a wetter down with the seed, which helps.
That's the SE14?
No, we use lure actually.
Oh, you use lure?
Yeah.
So how do you apply that? How are you applying that?
It goes out
in April. But before seeding or with the seeder?
No, with the seeder.
With the seeder.
We just tow a liquid card around and it just puts wetter down with the seed.
And you're getting a good result? That's working well?
Yes. And this year actually we turned it off halfway through because it was so wet and we thought we shouldn't possibly need wetter. And it's very obvious where we turned it off.
Oh, is it? Yeah. So it's still... Yeah.
Yeah, still patches of non-wetting and uneven germination where we didn't use it. And that in the cropping phase, having the wetter, when you get a more even germination, you get more density in your stubble. Obviously, you get you get more production, but you get more stubble, which then helps for the following year
Yeah.
because you've got that dry matter.
And salinity? Next question.
That's ongoing management
Perennials?
since probably the 60s.
Oh, okay.
So my grandfather chopped down all the trees. No.
No.
So again, my grandfather cleared the land
Yeah.
in order to farm it, and my father started replanting them, and that's been ongoing. So,
So you have a tree planting program?
yeah, although these days I plant trees more for shelter belts, for shade and shelter, and flowering shrubs rather than trees,
Oh, okay.
and perennials for water control. And in some areas of the farm, that's worked really well to halt the salinity. In other areas, it hasn't. It's just like a ongoing threat, I suppose. It can pop up in all kinds of places.
Yeah, and a learning curve how to manage it.
Oh yeah, we're still learning. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And over the years, we've done everything from the Wysalt banks and drainage banks and trees and perennials.
And how would you compare trees and perennials with the banks, or each has their place?
Yeah, they all have their place.
Yeah.
There's like no one solution for it.
Does it sound like you need an integrated solution?
Yes, definitely.
How would you consider your understanding of regenerative agriculture, and the general understanding within the community?
I see regen ag as a low input system, maintaining ground cover, reduced inputs, I suppose, reduced fertiliser, reduced chemical.
Cool. Yeah.
I did Alan Savory's holistic grazing management course many years ago.
Okay.
And then played around with it for a little while. And there's some very good principles in that.
Yep.
What I found with the grazing management was that it really only worked for certain periods of the year, because we have dry feed for 6 months of the year. And then lambing in the middle, and it was good for the land, not so good for the animals. So we've kind of adapted more to a slower rotation, not a really fast rotation. And it's not a fixed rotation.
No, it's a managed rotation.
Yeah. And part of that grazing management, we used to use pastures from space, which unfortunately is not available at the moment.
Oh yes, for food management.
Yeah. To look at historical data and analogue years and try and predict how much pasture growth we were going to have for the year.
Yes.
So then set your stocking rate to that, and you just got a better management of matching carrying capacity to your stocking rate.
So just delving into that a bit more, so you have small normal paddock size. What are your sort of paddock size?
15, 20 hectares, so they're quite small.
Yeah. So you have larger flocks.
Yeah. Yes. Depending on depending on a lot of things, depending on the management of that flock and what you are trying to achieve from that flock.
Okay. But then they just get moved around between the paddocks.
Yes.
Depending not a fixed rotation, just in a managed rotation.
Yeah.
Okay. If we can go into regen ag, their principles, and then try and see with what you are doing, which you've already actually covered on quite a few. Just to see how their principles and functions you're already doing, just to get that crossover. So one of them is minimising soil disturbance to build organic carbon and manage the water cycle.
Yep.
What's your practice on soil disturbance?
With the crops, we've been minimum till for 30 years or something like that.
Yep. Okay.
Um,
And how do you watch your organic carbon levels?
Yeah, with soil tests.
Yes, yeah.
Soil tests every year.
Okay, and are you seeing any pattern?
The long-term pasture paddocks, they increase cropping paddocks, it can vary. We very rarely burn stubble. We always try and keep that ground cover, harvest fairly low, chop up the straw and spread that back out behind the header.
And pasture cover, you try and maintain?
Yes, yes. Try and leave dry matter at the end of the season.
Yep.
And often that means sheep going to confinement feedlots just to get them off the pastures.
Okay. Yep.
Or they go onto perennial pastures which have a different grazing management and can be grazed at different times. Or they'll go into a paddock of fodder shrubs or something like that.
Okay, so you do have quite a diverse range of plants within your farm.
Yes.
Yep.
Just to complicate the management.
Yeah. Do you know what percent of perennials you would have if you on the farm?
It's about 15%.
Oh, so it's quite high.
Yeah. Perennial pastures, they depending on the type of perennial pasture, they have different management requirements.
Yep. So what are your main perennials? Type?
Mostly tall wheatgrass, kind of lucerne, chicory.
The chicory, you find that does chicory survive over several years? That's a perennial.
Yeah. The sheep like it.
Yeah. I've only ever grown it once, but they seem to do well.
We have a paddock of tall fescue. That's an older variety of fescue, and fescue has overtaken everything else that we put in that mix.
Oh, that's the dominant
and the
species.
sheep don't like it. It's not very digestible.
Yep.
But it makes a great lambing paddock because it's got all these tufts of grass, which is just great shelter for little lambs.
Okay.
So still very useful.
Cool. Yep.
We don't drench here.
Okay.
And I'm seeing much more increased activity with little dung beetles at all times of the year, which I think helps get organic matter back in the soil because they dig it down quite deep.
Okay. I'd never heard it. Yeah. How did you come about that? To not drench, or is that?
I've been breeding for it for 18 years.
Okay.
Breeding sheep that don't require drenching.
Yeah. But and maintaining good pasture cover is all part of that as well, I think, because isn't it when you get very little cover? My worm understanding's not great. Is that all integrated, or is it just through the breeding?
It's just through the breeding. I think you can reduce worm burdens if you've got a fast rotation and they're always eating fresh grass that's been spelled for a while.
Yep. Okay. Yeah. Okay. And so you're anecdotally noticing that by not drenching, it's increasing the microbial life.
Yep, definitely. Well, I think some drenches have adverse effects for dung beetles.
Yeah, because they go and eat this in
That's
the...
right, pass
through the animal into them. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. The sun shines 365 days of the year. We traditionally grow a crop for about 5 months, which we've touched on before. So is that something you're aware of, trying to maximise keeping as much green feed or green plants growing as much as you can through the year to maximise that solar function or the sun photosynthesis?
Yeah, through a few different ways. Well, one's perennial pastures because that extends your growing season, but also grazing management can help extend your growing season.
Okay, yeah.
And
can you elaborate more on the grazing management? How that works?
Yeah, so if you don't overgraze, if you aim to graze so the plant still has 3 leaves, it recovers much quicker and grows faster. And
then that makes it, and it can last longer into the summer. At the end
of the
year.
Part of it, yeah. Just depending on when you graze and how you graze, you can keep it in the vegetative state for longer. Once it's, is that the right word?
Yeah. No, vegetative.
Keep it in the vegetative state longer because once it starts putting up seed heads, it stops being so productive. And if you keep the sheep off the pasture at the break of the season until the plants get established, then they're much more efficient plants at using water and growing because they get their roots down.
So that's when you use confinement feedlots?
Yeah.
I'm aiming for a crop diversity in your pastures, in your fodder crops, But then obviously in your grain crops, you're just growing one controllable weeds, but then you're trying to get as much diversity as you can outside of that within your pastures.
Pastures need diversity, yeah. Obviously some weeds you don't want in there, but
Yeah.
The sheep do better when there's choice. And if you've got some legumes in there, it keeps the whole system ticking over a bit better. Yeah, so when we reseed any kind of pasture, there's always a variety of different types of legumes and different types of grasses in there.
A clover's your main legume?
Or aim for it, yeah.
Aim for it, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Have you tried anything else, or it's? Well, I actually can't think of any other long like Saradellas or.
Oh, look, we've tried a lot of them. Yeah, clover is the one that persists the best.
Yeah. And what's your predominant soil types?
It's about a third gravel loam, a third clay loam, and a third sandy loam.
Okay.
And obviously different. All the paddocks are fenced to soil type. I didn't mention that.
Oh, okay. Yep.
And obviously the pasture that grows down on, say, the clay flats alongside the creek is quite different to what we would grow up on the gravel hills.
The pasture is different?
Yeah. So
Can you
the
elaborate on
pasture
that?
is more specific to the soil type.
Oh,
Or down on the clay flats, where they tend to go underwater sometimes, Blanza clover is really good down there.
Yep.
And more perennial pastures. Whereas up on the gravel hills, you tend to get better production off your rye grasses unless you have an early break and then the clovers come through.
Okay. Your management style, when you're...
Chaotic.
But do you find... how much do you weight it to... We sort of covered a bit already, but how much do you weight to wait to long term? Just I guess sustainability and profitability have got to work hand in hand. One sort of helps fund the other. If you had to put a percent or a balance on the two in your management style, could you do that? Or is that?
Oh no, that's a hard question. I think they're probably balanced because you can't have one without the other.
Yeah. Okay.
I guess everything we do has a long-term view behind it. But, you know, because I want to be here for a long time. I've been here for 30 years and I'm not ready to go yet.
Yeah, yep.
But at the same time, we need to be productive. But I do think if you look after the land and look after your animals, therefore you are productive.
Yeah, they work hand in hand. Yeah.
It's interesting with the old clovers, like we've tried to replace those clovers with all sorts of things in different systems, but those seem to be the backbone of pastures. So do you think that they're managing your water as well as some of the other deeper rooted plants? Or?
No, they don't.
But yet they seem to be the backbone of our pastures, so we've sort of got a bit of a conflict there of trying to get maximum out of our pastures, but yet in one stage we're probably not using the species that's the best to extract moisture from deeper.
Yeah, and we probably tend towards a grass-dominant system because when you get the later breaks, you just don't get that clover growth anyway.
Yep.
And so you can be more productive with a grass-dominant pasture.
Yeah, so you get more water usage basically.
Yeah, more water usage, more water infiltration as well.
Yeah, that sort of works in that.
Yeah.
That way around. Yeah, that makes sense.
But yeah, that legume component is better than putting on urea. Like, it just works better for the whole system.
Have you dug down to see how far? Like, do you have any duplex country? Is it
Gravel over clay.
Clay, yeah, it was clay, yeah. And have you looked at the roots? How far down is that? Do the roots penetrate it? Have you looked at?
Oh, it's been many years since we dug a soil pit to see down how far down they go.
Oh, okay. Were they back when you did last, or too?
No, but back then we were rotationally overgrazing.
What does that mean?
So we were grazing paddocks really hard in order to get rid of weeds that we didn't want, And when the whole system changed, it was more about grazing to encourage the species that you do want to grow and outcompete the ones that you don't want. So it was a big mind shift in there, and it had a big effect on production as well.
All right. Can you explain that a little bit more? When you put a mob of sheep into a paddock, how do you want the paddock to look when they go in and when they come out?
Oh, well, what we used to do was the ag department went through a phase where they were saying use it or lose it. So you grazed everything really hard while it was green, because once it dried off, it decreased in quality and everything. So we used to put a mob sheep in a paddock at whatever stage it was at and make them eat it down. Okay. And if we had weeds in there that we were trying to get rid of, they're generally the last thing that the sheep want to eat.
Yep.
And so
you'd
overgraze the paddock down really low to make them eat those weeds that you didn't want. It was quite a mind shift then to go from that system to a shorter rotation where you put sheep in but you take them out before they've eaten everything down really low. So they're not overgrazing the good species, which can then grow up and outcompete the weeds that you didn't want in there anyway.
But they don't go for the good stuff and leave the bad stuff?
They do, but as long as you've got enough leaf area on your good stuff, generally it grows faster. Yeah.
And you've seen and then over time you get the bad stuff goes away, the weeds, the ones what you don't want goes away, and you get dominant by the good pasture species? You
do, and particularly if you say, you need potash or you need lime or something, if you're putting that on there to provide the right conditions for the plants that you want to grow and outcompete the others, you can do that.
You do it with chemicals at all?
Yes, we do some pasture manipulation, not every year. We'd like to do more, but... spray like MCPA, spray graze? Spray graze. Yeah, okay. Do you have much silver grass or... Not a lot of silvergrass. It comes up in places. The other thing I was going to say is if the weeds take over a paddock, you can always crop it. And manage it that way, and then control what you put back in. And cropping puts a little bit of tillage in there with your knife points, and you get a chance to completely change all the species that are in there. Yeah. So it's a good synergy between cropping and sheep.